With that, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Medin.
Thanks, buddy. A funny story about that Kerberos talk, by the way. So I worked on this talk for many, many years, trying to get this talk ready, get it prepped. There were 4 other Kerberos talks that weekend. I'm like, please, nobody release my technique. Thrilled, wake up the next morning, look at my phone. Benjamin Delpy in France had taken half of my stuff that day with his silver ticket attack. And I'm like, dude, you're French. You guys don't work in general. It's Saturday. Like, take the day off, man. What the hell? So yeah, it's some fun stuff there. Anyways, yeah, my name is Tim Medin. I am an instructor with the SANS Institute. I teach and author the pen testing course. I run a cybersecurity consulting company, Red Siege. Stop by the table. We had shirts. Maybe we have some. One of my guys is in Florida. And he's fortunately okay, but all of our swag is still there. So we quickly tried to overnight some shirts, but they might already be gone. We have stickers, stuff like that too. I've been pen testing for a long time here. It's funny, I had to come up with a talk title. I forgot about the talk title. Like, I put together a bunch of slides, and Mark's like, hey, what's your talk called? I'm like, I don't know. Like, didn't I tell you that already? He's like, no. I'm like, oh. So I try to come up with something edgy, and it kind of sucks. But anyway, let's go through. So I want to sort of, these keynotes are a little bit different. I like to keep it somewhat technical. I like to keep it kind of higher level at the same time. But in your career, I highly encourage you, be a little bit lazy. Now, if there's a parent sitting next to the kid, I can already see a couple of elbows. Like, don't listen to this guy. He's wrong. In fact, my mom, Mr. Kaler, 8th grade, we were learning BASIC. Any you older folks here know some BASIC? Yeah, I see lots of gray beards and maybe a little bit of thinning hair. Yeah, I see you. But on the wall, he had this beautiful sign. The best programmers are the laziest people. And my mom came in for a parent-teacher conference, and she came home furious. She's like, I can't believe that Mr. Kaler was telling you guys to be lazy. But then he explained why that made sense. You make the wise decisions when it comes to programming instead of doing the same thing over and over again. Write a function to take care of it, right? We also see that many times the simplest solution is not only the answer, but oftentimes the best answer. How many times, out of curiosity, have you overthought a problem and it ends up being like the dead freaking simplest thing ever? Yeah, I'm surprised I don't see more hands. Okay, all right, yeah. Right, it happens to us all the time. Relax, be lazy. The stupid stuff works. Now, APT, what does APT stand for? Somebody help me out. I like to keep this interactive, by the way, if you couldn't tell. The Advanced Persistent Threat. Right? Every time we hear of a breach, we're like, well, an advanced, highly sophisticated attacker. The advanced persistent threat is what has compromised our organization. And then you read the after-action report, the compromise report, you're like, really? Were they really that advanced? Were they even persistent? Like threat, all right, I'll give you that part, right? And the case study here is Equifax. Now, I'm not trying to pick on Equifax. This story is universal. It's the same thing. We hear it time and time again. So let's talk through the timeline here, again, with Equifax. So here's the situation. March 2017, the CVE is announced. So now the world knows this flaw exists. The breach occurs 2 months later. Now, at this point, there is public exploit code. What does the P stand for again? Persistent. This one, sorry. Yeah, tell me any word that starts with P. It's like Cookie Monster here, right? Yeah, the P here stands for persistent. Well, this was off-the-shelf code, and it took them 2 months. Persistent? Right? Like mom tells you, clean your room. I'm persistent, mom. I gotcha in December. Right? 2 months. Also, it's off-the-shelf code. The A in APC stands for what? Advanced. I mean, the dudes downloaded it and just used it. 2 months later, right? So we hear about this advanced persistent threat all the time, but so many times it's not. Out of curiosity, do we have some folks who work in IR here? The IR, I'm sure so many of the stories you hear in IR, at least the folks that I've dealt with, like, how are the bad guys getting in? Well, it's like phishing and bad credentials. It's not the high, sexy thing. It's not like necessarily like the brand new thing. The bad guys were in for months, finally detected them, kicked them out, right? Here's another article. I've tried to find a more recent article, but I haven't found one. This is a little bit dated, but it's important to look at the timing here. So we've got the date of this article, May 30, 2020. This is an advisory here from the NSA, very near and dear, I'm sure, to many of your hearts. They've been exploiting a vulnerability in XM mail transfer since August 2019. August to May is what, like 9 months? We can make a child in that amount of time. Like, we can create an entire human being, but we can't patch the mail server. Like, we could actually breed new people to patch for us in that amount of time. Right? 9 months. Another one here from October 2020. In a CVE, the second set of numbers is the year. 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2018, 2015. This child we have bred to give us to install patches is now in kindergarten and can read. Right? This patching class of humans now can actually install the patches themselves. 2015. The flaws here that were being exploited were all multiple years old. Right? We're looking at the end of the year here. There's lots of 2019s, and even older. So when it comes to that advanced persistent threat, they weren't even persistent enough necessarily to exploit it in the last 6 years. Right? Really, really long time. Let me tell you a couple other situations that I encountered in my career, sort of related to this, the dead simple stuff. So how many offensive people, let's say not just offensive, but like security offensive? A few of you? That's it? All right, just on this side. Nobody over here. All right. We'll talk to you folks here. How much time do you end up spending on a test? And I don't know how I'm going to have you answer this, but let me, when you're doing your test, do you spend a bunch of time doing some AV evasion type stuff? My pen testers? I got one yes. He speaks for everybody, okay? It's oftentimes, it does take a lot of time. But just like we saw with some of the other stuff, sometimes the dead simple crap works. So I was working with a friend of mine, Derek Banks. We were working on a pen test. And I really needed Netcat up on a Windows host. But if I just copied Netcat up to that host, it's getting busted. I was getting burned. So Derek, being smarter than I am, is like, hey, wait a second. There's a tool called Nmap. And in Nmap, there is another executable called ncat. Ncat does the same thing as Netcat. This time, though, this is a Nmap approved script. We all use Nmap, right? You even see security teams, systems administrators. A lot of people use Nmap. People trust Nmap. They also trusted ncat. Upload it, and it just worked flawlessly. And what's even better, it has more features than Netcat, so it supports encryption and all that jazz. Meanwhile, I'm like trying to like reverse engineer this and like change strings. He's like, bro, I got it working. I was like, oh, what'd you do? I just downloaded it and ran it. It's like, dang it. Absolutely worked. Another a great one. Jeff McJunkin, good friend of mine, fantastic gentleman. He was doing some AV evasion, can't share the real sample, but was looking at an executable called CTF tool. Tried to run that sucker on Windows. Got busted. So he's like, all right, let me take a little bit of time looking at a tool called Defender Check to figure out the offset. Where is my executable getting busted? And it showed up with the name Tavis Ormandy. So the name of the author was the trigger to mark this thing as bad. So what's the simple answer? Change his name. Yeah. Tavis Ormandy is bad. Now he puts on a mustache and those little crappy glasses. His brother, Tavis Ormandy, totally cool. Right? And of course, worked just fine. One of my favorite things, and by the way, when I say favorite things, I'm an offensive person, so it's probably not good for everybody else. But the gift that keeps on giving, bad passwords. Right? Like, I kind of feel bad as a pen tester that most of the times I'm getting in or doing lateral movement, doing most of my stuff, it's this. It's the bad passwords. Right? It just works. And I hear people think, well, don't you use exploits? No, I don't have to. I can just log in. Like, why? Like the exploits are hard. I just log in like you do. And people pick these exceptionally bad passwords. One of my favorites, and by the way, this is not a suggestion. Don't do this. Any auditors in the room? You guys don't allow auditors here, right? No auditors allowed? Very cool. Best conference. Okay, cool. According to the auditors, how often are we supposed to change our passwords? 90 days. You know why? When Moses came down from the mountain, it's the third tablet. No, sorry. When Einstein derived E equals MC squared, he then, no. My money, it was two dudes working together, like, hey, Carl, how long do you think passwords should be good for? It's like, well, I don't know, Steve. What do you think about 90 days? Great, Carl. Stamp it. And now we have this. If you ask anybody why 90 days, there is no answer. It's like, well, it's kind of like dividing 365 by 4 if you're kind of bad at math and just like to round things. So we end up with this 90 days, right? How many of you have worked the help desk on January 2nd? What's the call that you get nonstop that day? Oh, no, there's one call, January 2nd. What are you getting all day long? What's my password? Right? How many of you have called on January 2nd and sucked somebody else's will to live? No? Nobody? Okay. Yeah, so people get tired of calling IT. They're like, man, looking out their window, right? Like it might be kind of cold here, maybe an occasional snow, January 2nd. Like, man, if I could just look out my window and know my password. You're like, huh, it's winter. What if I use capital W, lowercase enter as my password? It's like, well, wait, I need a number. And there's a winter this year, and there's probably going to be a winter next year, so I can't reuse my password. So they're like, man, if only there was a number that would differentiate this winter from next winter. And they sit there for probably 45 minutes to an hour to come up with that solution, which is what? The year. Right? And then 90 days later, they change their password to what? Spring. You guys are way smarter. I was in a room like this. What's after winter? And they're like, Nothing. I'm like, all right, cool. At least I know you're not using that password scheme because you're not smart enough to, but whatever. 9 days later after that, right? It's super hot here in Augusta. We have summer. Very good. No one's screwed up the months yet. Very good. Right? So we see this type of scheme. And again, as the attacker, I don't need all the passwords. I need one. Right? I need one way in. I was at another organization. They said, Tim, that's not going to work here. I was excited. I was like, good for you. What are you guys doing to prevent this? Are you banning bad passwords? Are you preventing passwords with the season or the year? He's like, no. We fixed it because we change passwords every month. And I waited and waited. And in my mind, like, there are so many sarcastic answers that are like just filtering by, like, ooh, this is a good one. This is a better thing to say. And I'm like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And I'm like, I'm just going to try the month in the year. You see him go, oh. It hadn't occurred to him. First account we got was the director of HR. There are two groups of people that most people in a business are scared of. One of them is IT. We're not scared of IT. In fact, we crush them for fun when we're offensive people, right? I mean, we help them. That sounds rude. Human resources, still terrified, right? Because they can fire me. They control my benefits. They help me understand whatever the complication is with my deductible and reaching my limits and my children and whatever magic. And you get attachments for days from HR. So just send a couple of emails. People are clicking on stuff like absolute mad. So we're seeing, this is a dead simplest way in that we're seeing. Both from externally, internally. I actually tweeted about this and said, hey, give me your interesting password stories. Winter 2019 here was one of them. Guess the password just from a conversation. I'm so interested to know how that conversation went. Right? The domain admin password was the same as the username. That's some advanced stuff right there, right? Password spray, this is where you're trying just a few passwords for all of the users. 30% of the company. 30%, right? Breach passwords, right? They use their password at some other site. That password is compromised and reuse it. These are the ways, these are the good guys. Right? These are the ways that I'm getting in. Guess how the bad guys are getting in? The same way. They're just not telling you. You're getting a free pen test. It's more expensive, and you don't get a cool report at the end. Right? Like they're running ransomware, like you're still paying, you don't get the cool report. I'm not telling you how they got in, but this is the exact same thing that we're seeing here. Right? I've seen other things, like in help pages, where literally like the help page says, hey, use this password to log in here. I've seen documentation publicly available. Again, just simply to log in. Once again, those lovely, lovely passwords. Now, the purpose of my talk here is to show you much of this stuff is dead simple. I would suspect many of you are here, to learn, to make yourself better, maybe make a job or a career change. Set yourself up for the future. This is a scenario. This was a number of years ago. I had never attacked any IoT devices before. I'd never done it. I wanted to. So I saw this blog post from a friend of mine, and he, in his blog post, showed how he reverse engineered this firmware. So let me show you the screenshots from here. So this was a TrendNet camera here. And what he did is downloaded the firmware and used a tool called binwalk. What binwalk does is it looks in that file for other pieces of files, other headers. Now, the modern versions of binwalk will actually extract it for you. In the olden days, you had to do it manually. So it is using the DD command here to split it apart. I don't expect you to be able to read all of this text here. But what he's done here is we see at the top is there's 3 chunks. There's offset 0 to that, 32320. There's another chunk in the middle, and then 1 at the end. So he splits it up into 3 pieces, and then looks at the third one. The third one says it is a Linux file system. gzip compressed data was rootfs from Unix. Extracts that. Looks inside that and sees a directory called server. Inside there, CGI, bin. There's another directory, Anani. If you had to guess, what does Anani stand for? Anonymous. Yeah, these questions aren't hard. Anonymous. So literally taking the camera, going to the Anani directory, CGI or mjpeg.cgi, and you had remote access to the camera. Dead simple, right? Now this was his version. This was what he did. I'm like, cool. So I went to Amazon. I spent $42.31 after tax to buy my own camera. Different brand, and literally walked through the exact same steps here. Ran binwalk, extracted the firmware, found the file system. I didn't find anything called Anani. Now, where is one of the first places, if you compromise a Linux system, or if somebody compromises, where is one of the first places you look when you're trying to learn about that system? Somebody said in the back there, louder. Etsy password, good call. Now, in Etsy password is account information. In newer Linux systems, you have passwords in another file, typically Etsy shadow. But in old Linux systems and brand new IoT devices, they put, there was an oh no in the back. You see, you know it's coming, don't you? The passwords were in Etsy password. That's okay. Usually the passwords are hashed. This case, they use a very special hashing algorithm, base64s. Now, base64 is kind of like the crappy code you come up with your friends. Okay? It is not encryption, it's encoding. You can literally grab a pen and paper and decode this, right? Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. Now, this password, I'm looking through the user interface and looking through the file here. So I'm looking through the file, I see root, web interface, there's a user root. In the file, there's a user viewer. In the web interface, there's a user viewer. In my file, Etsy password, there's a user factory test. Thank you for the extremely deep sigh. Like, it's fantastic. I need like a special effects, sound effects button. It's great. That user account was not in the web interface. So I could log in as this factory attest count on every single one of these devices throughout the world. Okay? Now, I literally followed this hack by number and looked in the first file that we look at and found this thing. Literally, it was like 2 to 3 minutes. And I was like, I mean, it felt good, but at the same time, I was like, that's it? I ended up selling that to the company, a bug bounty, for $4,000. I have never made that much money that quickly in my entire life. And I probably never will again. Right? $4,000. It was funny because it was before the company had a bug bounty program. So you had to be a little bit careful. If you contact them and say, hey, bros, pay me or else I release this, there's a very special legal term for that. It's called extortion. So you had to like be a little bit cagey. You're like, well, do you compensate for exclusive disclosure of vulnerabilities that could negatively impact your brand and stock price? Right? This is not a contractual agreement that I blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but just literally followed somebody else's work here. I'm not saying don't try to be original, but there are so many people's shoulders to stand on. And there's so much out there. Try what other people's have done so that you can understand that. We'll come back to some of that a little bit later here too. Another situation. Anybody a giant football fan? I am a huge football fan. Like I'm trying to see if I can get a table at my booth to have college football behind me. I think it'd be fantastic. Anyways, I'm a big Green Bay Packers fan. I grew up in central Wisconsin. And I was trying to stream the Packers game. I live in Texas. I was trying to stream the Packers game down in Texas because it's not on the local station. So I bought, I forgot it was, like NFL Rewind. Allows you to watch every single game. And I'm watching it on my tablet. It was an Android tablet using Amazon app. But I have an Apple TV, so I wanted to like stream it to my Apple TV. And I tried, it says, sorry, AirPlay is not supported for this device. And I was like, well, that stinks. Or no, sorry, AirPlay is not enabled for this device. And I was like, well, that's a weird wording. So what I did is I downloaded, so I looked at, I fired up a sniffer, and I looked at what was being sent to and from this app. Inside the app, there was this configuration file, and it said, AirPlay enabled, false. And I was like, you jerks. It's there. You're just like, we hate Apple. Screw you. So what's the obvious fix here? True, right? AirPlay enabled, true. Now in my app, I get an error message that says invalid signature. So I scroll down in the configuration, and there's this signature thing at the end. I'm like, dang it. What's the fix now? Re-sign it. That's hard. Give me easy. Nuke it. Downloads the configuration file, checks the signature. Oh, there isn't one? Fair enough. Like, you don't have to be super fancy. Try the dead simple thing first. To be fair, I was like trying to get the certificate. I was trying to factor the key. I spent hours on it. And then almost literally by accident, my search and replace didn't work. And it just deleted it. I'm like, why is it working? I'm like, well, that's amazing. I wish I would have thought of that sooner, right? Try the dead simple thing first. Be lazy. I got one of the guys on my team, Mike, who is the destroyer of MFA. And he tries really complex things like normally you put the username, the password, the MFA token, and access the page, right? Username, password, MFA. Nah, I just skip that and go right to the page. And the page is like, yeah, fair enough, close enough. You tried. We asked you for the MFA, but you didn't have it, but here you go. Right? The dead simple thing here. We had the MACOS flaw a few years ago. Anybody remember this lovely thing? Enter, 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 and you get a root prompt. Right? Dead simple stuff. Literally somebody hammering a keyboard. There's probably somebody holding a toddler in their lap. It's like bing, 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 bing. How did I get root all of a sudden? Right? Or my favorite flaw of all time. I call this the kids' soccer trophy flaw. So with this flaw, 1 in 256 times, authentication says, congratulations, you're in. Now I'm trying to imagine the person that found this. Because like, Nessus probably reported like, you have a bad password on this MySQL server. So the person tries to log in with this bad password, right? It doesn't work. And they're like, well, Nessus said it worked, so they try it again. And then they probably rage and they're like 4, 1 to infinity, log in, go. 5 seconds later, it works. Right? It's the participation trophy. Hey, you tried to authenticate? Good job, Tommy. Come on in. Right? Dead simple flaws like this. Now, I want to let you know, like, there's so many times in my career that I've tried to solve the problem up here when the solution is down here. And this isn't even just the technical stuff, right? We mentioned this a little bit earlier. How many times have you tried an exceptionally hard thing, stepped away for a second, and you're like, oh my God, it's the simple answer. That absolutely worked. Related to this, oops, wrong one. Sorry. You can always learn more. The most dangerous people in any organization, in my mind, are the people who know everything. And they don't want to listen to other people. And even worse than that, they squash the new people. The new people have some new idea, some new experience you probably have done maybe 10, maybe even 20 years ago. Let them enjoy it. Like, hey, cool, good job for you. And then shut the hell up. You don't have to tell them. It's like, well, when I did that, who cares? Right? Let them enjoy that. You never know too much. The most confident I ever was in my entire career was when I was brand new. I remember walking into a company doing a pen test. I have never been more confident in a pen test in my entire life. The most confident people I know these days are super happy to say, I don't know, and be okay with it. And in fact, you probably work with some of those people, and they're the most trustworthy people you know. Because you know they're not going to BS you. They're not going to lie to you, right? But it's hard sometimes to say, I don't know, and be okay with that, especially when you're more junior, when you actually are learning. But I encourage you, embrace that. Like, get quickly, like, I don't know, but here's how I'm going to try to figure out the answer to this. All right, we're going to come back to that a little bit more. Here's another sort of situation here. A number of years ago, there was a competition to go to Las Vegas. Go to Black Hat, okay? Whoever won this would get a black card, free entrance to Black Hat. I had never been to Black Hat. So I'm like, cool, I want to go. How to be a ninja in 3 steps. Like, all right, cool, let's be a ninja here. Okay, so how to be a ninja, step 1. So there was this app that if you downloaded it and installed it on your phone, you would get like 10 points. Just installing the app gives you 10 points. And there were other ways to get extra points. You could crack passwords, you could map the network, you could sniff a URL, some other stuff, but just installing the app, 10 points. Cool, right? So I want to get more than, I need to get a lot of points because I want this free ticket, right? I install the app on my phone. Next step. What's the next step here? And again, simple, think dumb. Uninstall it, install it again. Cool. What else? That takes a while, right? Related to that, you're on the correct path here. Installed on 10 different devices. Sir, I don't have that many friends. There we go. So when I install this thing, it needs to communicate back to the server to say, yes, this was installed on a device. So the actual install, uninstall, reinstall process is essentially a replay attack. Sniff the traffic, replay this over and over and over and over again. And it worked, right? Scoring a ton of points here. And if we looked at the payload, we saw some sort of payload that looked like this, right? Okay, cool. Now, the problem was, now Tim Tomes, he might be here a little bit later. Tim Tomes, former good friend of mine, he and I were working on this together. So we installed this app. After a while, it was actually Mother's Day weekend. We're at lunch. for my mother-in-law. And Tim and I were going back and forth, like we're trying to figure out how to make it faster and stuff. Like his internet's faster than mine, so hypothetically, I may have used some work servers to send more traffic to play it faster. So we're going back and forth. I figured out a trick to make it go faster, and I'm looking at my phone at Mother's Day lunch. Don't do this. And according to my math, I'm going to pass Tim in about 10 minutes. So I'm like, yeah, happy Mother's Day. Refresh, 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 right? Just keep looking. The site goes offline. So now I'm like panicking. I'm like, great. Like I said, there's whole lunch now, and I got to figure out what's going on. Come to find out, they're like, we were crashing their servers because we were just hammering them. But they said, hey, no more replay attacks. So we see this. I'm like, oh, crap, right? So we would try to register. It would say, hey, duplicate device ID. What's the next step then? What's that? Throw random data in there. I like your thinking. Didn't work. What does this look like? Base 64, right? Let's decode this thing. Looks like this. What do we change then? The Android ID, right? Change the Android ID, base 64 encode it, send it back to the server. Now it says invalid magic. So here is the payload. So the data is what I showed you right here, right? Now we've got this magic. What's the first option with the magic? Nuke it, right? Good call. Didn't work. The next step here then. Well, the answer is a little bit of reverse engineering. So literally open up the thing in JADX and do a search for magic. Like, where's magic? Okay, cool. Found magic here. All right, look at the code. So there's magic. Next to it's a variable called stir. Stir is used up here with A2. We will worry about what A2 does later, but I see A2 like a couple of times. A2 is up here. A2 comes from B, which is my data, right? So the question is, what does this function do at the top? So what's that? Did you figure this out already? Holy, awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, what I was going to ask is, what does this do? I did zero reverse engineering on this, but just looked at it. What was the key for you that it was base 64? So you saw that. So you saw the pattern in the magic back here. Okay, very good. Just reading the code. What were the two pieces that stood out to you? One or two? Where they're starting in an array. The two pieces that stood out for me literally says bad base 64, but the 3/4, because base 64 takes 3 characters, converts it to 4. Literally, I didn't reverse engineer this at all. I'm like, what happens if their magic encoding is just more base 64? And then take the second character and the last 9 and duct tape them together, and now we can create our own magic. Right? Now I'm a sorcerer. I don't need your magic. I have my own. Right? We are going to Harry Potter the crap out of this thing. So talking to Tim, he figures out like, hey, you know what? Here's the code here. I've got the inside is the plan. The plan here by default is basic. Well, if you tell it you are on the platinum plan, you have a multiplier now, very bottom of 2.5 times for each request. So instead of 10 points, you now get 25. Also, if you submit a payload with every single one of these things, you get all of those points. In fact, the cracking a password didn't work in the app. But I was scoring points. We were scoring points for this because we just put the XML in there that said password cracked, true. And multiply that, right? So that one was broken. So we take 10 plus 5 plus whatever, 142, multiply it by 2.5, so 355 points per request now, right? So I'm sitting at my house. I get a call Sunday at my desk from the guy who runs this thing. He basically says, "Hey, this is so and so. Can you stop?" Because we had crashed their servers like multiple times. So like I'm talking to Tim Tomes. I had passed him at this point. I'm like, "Tim, man, I know you're gonna try to get ahead of me." He's like, "Oh, I'm already going to Black Hat. Do you want the ticket?" "Yeah, I do, Tim." This is why I no longer talk to Tim. No, I'm just kidding. So we ripped through this thing. We can see like Christy Priory here probably had some of those. I was on track to get like 1 billion points, but then don't crash our servers, whatever. Got the trip. But again, the answer here was simple, right? The simple replay attack is what did it. Not even reverse engineering the code, wild ass guessing. Like maybe it's base 64, right? Just try the simple stuff. You don't have to get super, super complicated. Learn from new people. I can't tell you how many times I have been trapped in trying to solve a problem up here and instead should have just tried the simple answer or ask somebody who's never experienced that problem in their life. There's 2 real-world scenarios where this has worked phenomenally well. RSA encryption existed because there was a new guy to the company, and the boss man said, "Hey, can you figure out how to do asymmetric encryption?" And so over lunch, he figured it out, basically. He's like, "Oh my God, we've been working on this for years." But nobody told him that it was supposed to be a hard problem and literally solved it. There was another case. College professor had 2 math problems on the board. 2 math problems on the board. And a student came in late, saw that, went home, came back. He's like, "I think I got the answers. It was really hard." And the professor said, "We didn't have homework." He's like, "Well, you had 2 problems on the board yesterday, so I spent a few hours last night and I solved it." There were 2 formulas or algorithms, whatever, that had never been solved in mathematics before. And he just did it that night because he thought he was supposed to be solvable homework and no one told him it was supposed to be hard. So, talk to get that perspective. Don't think, "Oh, you're new. I can't learn anything from you." Related to that, you're going to go to some talks here today. You're going to see a lot of people getting up in front of you. We all did our first presentation. My first presentation sucked so bad. He says yes. Were you there? He actually might have been. It was a 60-minute presentation on PowerShell. I finished it in 16 and a half minutes. I got up front, incredibly excited, super nervous, and just went just as fast as I could. And in my brain, I'm like, "Slow down." My body's like, "Cool, let's go faster." I couldn't stop. It was such a terrible presentation. I got to the end, and I'm seeing people's eyes. A couple of ones like, one of them was like, "Stop, man." People are like pointing at water, like, "Take a water bottle, just anything." And I'm like, "Got it, faster." Okay, my first presentation was terrible. But then I got better at it and got better. But what I'm trying to tell you here is you have a tremendous opportunity. This BSidesAugusta is, in my opinion, the best BSides in the nation. You've got a huge opportunity to come to this conference, one, to learn from other people, but I can guarantee you have something to share. And you might be sitting there, it's like, "Well, no, I don't. I'm new." Yeah, but there's other new people. You have a topic that you know better than me. Guarantee it. Tell me your version. Tell me your story on how did you develop the skills to get where you are. That's what's interesting. How many talks are you going to go to today where someone is releasing brand new O-Day? Probably not many. And frankly, even if they were, it's probably not useful to the masses. What's useful to most people is here's this, I don't want to say simple thing, this thing that's simple to you, but might not be simple to everybody else, right? I mean, lock picking has been a thing for multiple millennia. But you're still going to go there and learn how to do it, maybe, right? So I would highly encourage you, and maybe it's not coming to an event like this. Maybe it's a blog post. Maybe it's a smaller thing. Maybe it's a lunch and learn at your office. But I highly encourage you, get out there and share what you know. Your version of the story is the interesting piece. So sign up for these conferences next year. Volunteer to be a speaker. You know, there's probably smaller events. If this many people is scary. But I highly encourage you, get out there, do a talk, share what you have. You have something interesting that I don't know. You have something interesting that most of the people here don't know. I look at the statistics at our Red Siege website, and I look at the blog posts. The blog posts that have the most hits are blog posts that we almost didn't do because we thought they were too simple. But we have like a shortage in our industry. We're trying to get more and more people into our industry to help out. So this simple stuff works, right? And I know a lot of people, you're like, you know what? I'll do it someday. Cool. When? When are you going to put that stake in that's lying in the sand? You know what? Like, let me pick a day. Right? It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but draw a line. You're like, look, I want to do a talk between now and next year at Augusta. I want to write a sort of blog. I want to do informational TikToks. Right? Whatever. But get out there, figure out what your plan is going to be. If you continue to take the same actions, you're going to get the same results. Right? If you want to change your life, if you want to change your career, but you're taking no actions to change it, guess what? You're going to come back here next year, and you're going to have the same mental conversation in your head. So get out there. I mean, look around you. There's people around you. Talk to them. Talk to the people at the booths. I find at these conferences, the most valuable thing is the hallway talk. In fact, I tell my employees when we go to conferences, hey, if you don't go to a single talk, I'm okay with it. I didn't tell you, because there's so much valuable conversation that we have with other people going through the same struggles, the same things that we're going through and learning from that, right? Where do you want to be? The one thing you can't buy is more time. Your only resource in life, you have exactly one, time. You trade it for friendship, you trade it for money, you trade it for food, you trade your time for that. So make the decision to spend your time making the changes that you want. This is more specifically around the security career here, but what I'm trying to tell you here is there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. And it doesn't have to be hard. All of the things, all of the attacks that I just showed you, dead simple. Right? Not a single one of those was very difficult. And if you didn't understand it, I'd be happy to explain it to you some more, but none of that stuff was super complicated. So in short, give back. Okay? That is my time, I think. Do we have time for questions or no? Cool. Questions? This is where I say Bueller, but then I see a bunch of the younger people. They're like, "Who the hell is Bueller?" Go for it. So when I was talking about the app with the reverse engineering and that payload, the payload was being verified on the server. It was being verified on the server.
Was there one thing that kind of got you started, like aha moment or something like that got you interested in security?
Yeah. So and I'm going to answer a slightly different question from that. The question I get all the time is, where should I start? And my response is, well, what is interesting to you? Because if I give you an answer and you hate that thing, you're never going to do it, right? Find the thing in security and dig into that piece. Are you into web? Cool, spend some time in web. Are you into reverse engineering? There's a lot of blog posts to help you with those things. Are you into GRC? Whatever it might be, pick the thing that's useful to you. For me, when I was a kid, I would reverse engineer like video games till I figure out how to make my little dudes faster, right? Like I had this little soccer game and the top speed was 99, but if I went in and edited the hex and changed it to FF, their speed was like 256, and I could just run around like mad. It was awesome. Yeah.
What cybersecurity threat targeting our nation's polarized democracy concerns you the most?
What cybersecurity threat targeting our nation's democracy frightens me the most? Polarized democracy. I don't know what that. I don't know. I think the biggest thing I'm scared of is some of the cyber threats against some of the critical infrastructure, because that has the potential to impact, everyday people, power, stuff like that. Okay, cool. We got people heading out. There's other talks. Thank you all so much for your time. Be sure to stop by the booth.